Okay, so I rolled out a 1/4 inch slab of the SiO2 black porcelain.
CO2.
CO2. It's SiO2.
Yeah, it's called CO.
Oh, it's pronounced CO2, like carbon dioxide. Okay, and then I'm just compressing my slab so I don't have to worry about that canvas texture or that anything rips apart later on. I don't like having the canvas texture show up on anything. I like my slabs very smooth if I can. This one's very damp, so the other side's getting pretty wet still on the wood. There's a lot of water in these.
Okay, so you got both sides compressed. I'm gonna roll the texture on here. We have this rolling pin from Micheals. I think it's called the lattice rolling pin. This is the first time using this black clay for hand building. Usually we're throwing with it, or I'm throwing with it. And then we're gonna use these textured stamps that we have, which we got from Kimberly Moon from Etsy. They're just bisque stamps.
So now that we have this rolled on, what I like to do is I'll take my template and I'll put it on top of the main texture and then trace it with my needle tool. It's gonna get bigger later on, but this gives you a good idea of where to put your extra stamping that we're gonna do right after this, so you don't waste time stamping a whole slab.
And these are just cone templates that we made online. You could print out PDFs of it. I just use Mylar to cut out templates with my Cricut. So this one is a 3-inch bottom and 4-inch top cone. So when you put it together, you get a cone like that. That is 3-inch round at the bottom and 4-inch at the top. Okay. I'm gonna just stamp this.
Okay, now that we press that on, I'm just gonna lift it up to make sure my slab didn't get stuck, because this is a very wet slab. No, we're all good. Now I'm gonna get my template one more time, try to line it up. It's okay if it doesn't fit exactly, because when you put it on again, it should have got bigger anyway. Like, yeah, my template did get smaller than my stamping did. It got bigger on both sides. So I'm just gonna pick whichever side more I like, get it in the middle somewhere where all my stamps meet, and then I should be fine. Now I'm gonna get my Exacto knife and start cutting out my slab. And it's okay if your edges aren't pretty, because we're gonna fix those later on. Just make sure to be careful with the corners of your template, because if you pull too fast on one of them, you could stretch out that corner and it'll mess up how it'll fit later on. And there's a reason we're using very soft clay with this, because we're gonna pinch out the form while it's still in a cone, so we can play with the profile some more. Otherwise, if you do it leather hard, it's gonna work as a cone probably, but you can't really do much else with it. And there we have it. This is our texture. And it looks a lot better now that it's cut off and all nicely pushed. So now what do I do is I press down one end with my thumb, because that's going to be one seam. You could use one of those like angle cutters or something, but this is so much easier. And you can clean it up later anyway. And then what I do is I get my scoring tool now, because I like to score the bottom ahead of time. Where's the scoring tool? There it is. This one. This one makes life so much easier, because because the big scoring tool is gonna get in the way, and you don't want to use the needle tool because you're gonna just like get annoying. So I just go like this because it's easier than doing it later on, flipping it over and everything. So I just score it now. I like to score a lot in different directions. So I'll go straight first, and then I'll go diagonal one way, diagonal the other. Now I'll flip it over. Now I will press this other side for the other seam with my thumb. And now with that first seam we made, now that we have the back of it, now we score this side ahead of time. And you want to score it a lot because you want it to join very well, so you can keep the look of the seam without having to smooth it out if you like the look. I like to keep my seams because I think it gives it like a little idea of how it was made, and some people like that. Now I lift it up, do the same thing with the other seam that we made. It's okay if your texture got a little messed up on that side or whatever, you're gonna smooth it out with your thumb again later on. Now I'm going to put some slip on one side of my seam.
It's magic water.
Yeah, it's the magic water mixed in with this clay body a little. Now lift up the side. You can flip over the whole thing if you want, but it's just easier just lifting up like this. Put some magic water slip over here. And now you could use a cone shape to put it over, but I just like doing it like this because I'm gonna bend it around anyway. And because it's very soft clay, it's just gonna go all over the place, but it's fun because you get to play with that afterwards. Now I have that. It don't gotta be perfect right now. Then I get my banding wheel. And now I just line up my seam a little better, all the way here. Then I slowly just get it all attached. Then I flip it around a few times, going from the bottom to the top, just because it's not a perfect cylinder. That I can't just fit my hand all the way through. I have big hands. And now I just keep pressing it until all that little slip comes out. I do that a few times just to make sure there's a really good seal. And while it's up here again, you could score a little more here if you like. Now that you're on the banding wheel, it's easy. Okay, and now I'm gonna make this part look like a circle a bit. I'm gonna make this part look like a circle a little bit better. And now I'm gonna play with how the look of my slab is. So on my banding wheel, I try to get it as centered as possible, just by eye. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want it pretty close, just so you don't push out one side too much. Otherwise you're gonna have a lopsided cup, which is okay sometimes, because your texture might cover that up. So now I'm gonna take my thumb like this and put it in like that, and my fingers are gonna press like that if I want it to bellow out here. And remember, you can only go outwards, really, you can't go inwards. So whatever you have small and you want to keep small, you don't touch it. So wherever I want bigger, I'm just going to push out. So I want this little area bigger around the top. So it's going to look kind of like a pineapple. And since I don't want it to bellow out here too, I'm going to put my finger here. So it only pushes out in this little band in the top. always go a little bit on your seams again, just because when you push it out, you could be pushing your seam apart, but you don't want it to come apart. And as long as you're attentive to it, it'll stay together for you. Okay, so now that I rolled out another slab and smoothed out the back and front, I'm gonna use a flexi bat to show you a fun way to get a pattern on the inside of your pot. So now I placed it on here. What I'm gonna do is, I like using a light bulb, but you can use anything. You can use a bunch of different things. And I just aim for the middle, and then just go like that. Oh, and then we also have a pony roller. That's good too. Now let's see if we got an impression. Otherwise, if not, we just put it back on and do a little more. Oh, and we got an impression. Ta-da! We got a nice impression. And now what I do is I just measure out what kind of circumference I have on here. So this is a 4.4 inch round cookie cutter, and this is a little bigger than my base of this, but that's what we want. You want something slightly bigger because when you stretch it out, it's going to get smaller a little. And if it is a little bigger, it's easier to blend in more. But if you can get a perfect one, if you want a flat one, then you want a perfect size. Now I just center this. Punch it out. Voila, you have your base. If you want, you can put some more texture around it too. You want to put some stamps on the inside? And this is gonna be for the base. I will take this mushroom anvil. It might be too soft, it might get rid of the texture. This might be a little too early, so hopefully my texture's still on there afterwards. And yes, it is. It just made the words a little bolder, but it's still there. Get some slip. Put it on your seams. Muddy it up a bit so it joins really well, because when you join it well, you don't really need to use extra coil. If it was a bigger piece and you really didn't want to play the game of risking it, then yeah, you could use one, but because it's a weird shape and it's hard for my hands to fit in here afterwards, I'm not. I just make sure I compress it really well and then clean up the seams on the outside, and then you don't have to worry about it. And also letting it dry slowly. Otherwise, if you let it dry in one night, then yeah, your seam's gonna crack. Then fit it on. I'm gonna have it line up to where my seam and this meet. And then I just like stick it on there. Then I'll adjust it a little just to make sure it fits at least with the same amount of space on each side. Now we cut out a foot for our pot. Because this base gives it enough clearance for it to sit pretty flat on there, you don't have to worry about it being too raised on the edges. But what you can do is when it's firmed up more, you can just push it down on a piece of flat surface to help flatten it out all the way. But what I'm going to do is, now that I cut out a ring, I'm going to score one side. You want to score it especially on the edges, because you don't want it to like lift up on the edges and crack on the edges, because it won't look pretty. It'll probably still work, but you don't want it to look like that too. Then I basically just try making a little guideline for it. Score it, so now I have it on here. I could just score it like this, inside those little rings. And then I'm gonna put some slip on here. Put some on her. Then I just line it up, make it a circle. Now what I do is I tap it in. Now once it's a little firmer up, I'm gonna attach it a little better because I can't get the side in without pushing in my bottom all the way. I don't want it concave at all. But usually you would do this once it's more leather hard, because then you have more control over it. But then once I'm done with that, I'm going to flip it over on the foot, get it centered, and then I'll basically be cleaning up the top. So yeah, you can make these in different shapes and sizes, and even make them into pitchers, vases, teacups. I like the ones that look like whiskey glasses a little bit more because they're fun. Let me show you the finished one. Okay, so yeah, here's the finished one. That's the smaller cone I have with, I believe, like maybe a 4-inch base that I curved only with a bigger anvil. And also this light bulb. Then I attached it with the seam still on there because I liked how the seam looked on this one. And then I added the handle and the spout and also some holes in the inside to make it a pitcher.